The ranch hand who defied every rule. Chapter 1: The Confrontation. The barn fell silent the moment Jamie's voice cut through the humid Texas air like a whip crack. "With all due respect, sir, that's the dumbest damn thing I've ever heard." 20 pairs of eyes snapped toward the new stable hand, this scrawny kid who'd barely been on the Double R ranch for 3 weeks, as he stood toe-to-toe with Cole Harrington, the 6'4" foreman who'd made grown men quit with nothing more than a hard stare. Jamie's hands trembled at his sides, his chest rising and falling rapidly, but he didn't back down even as Cole took a step closer, close enough that Jamie could see the dangerous flash in those storm-gray eyes. The morning light streaming through the barn slats caught the tension between them, illuminating the dust motes that seemed to freeze in the air, and in that moment, every cowboy present knew they were witnessing something that would change everything on this ranch. Cole's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching beneath his stubbled cheek as he stared down at the kid who just challenged him in front of the entire crew. Jamie Reeves was barely 20, with sun-streaked brown hair that fell into his eyes and a lean build that made him look like he'd blow away in a strong wind, but there was something in his stance, something fierce and unyielding, that made Cole pause instead of immediately putting him in his place. The kid's green eyes blazed with conviction, his lips pressed into a thin line, and despite the obvious fear that made his fingers curl into fists, he held his ground. "What did you just say to me?" Cole's voice was low, controlled, the kind of quiet that preceded a storm. Jamie swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly, but he didn't drop his gaze. "I said it's dumb to move the herd to the south pasture right now. The grass hasn't recovered from the drought and you'll lose half your calves if their mothers can't get proper nutrition." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, betraying his nervousness, but he pushed through it. "I know I'm new here and I know I'm just a stable hand, but I grew up on a ranch in Montana and I've seen what happens when you graze too early on damaged land." The barn remained utterly silent. Someone coughed nervously in the back. Tommy Rodriguez, one of the senior hands, muttered something under his breath that sounded like a prayer. Everyone knew what happened to people who questioned Cole Harrington, especially in front of others. The foreman's authority was absolute on the Double R, second only to Old Man Richardson himself, and in the 3 years since Cole had taken the position, he'd built a reputation for running the tightest, most efficient operation in 3 counties. Cole took another step forward, closing the distance until there were only inches between them. Jamie had to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact, and Cole could see the pulse hammering in the kid's throat, could smell the fierce sweat mixing with hay and leather and something else, something clean and fresh like rain on summer grass. "You think you know better than me?" Cole asked, his voice still dangerously soft. "You think 3 weeks mucking out stalls makes you qualified to question my decisions?" "No, sir." Jamie's voice was steadier now, though his hands still shook. "I think 7 years working cattle with my father before he died makes me qualified to recognize a mistake when I see one." Something flickered across Cole's face, surprise maybe or recognition, but it was gone so quickly that Jamie wondered if he'd imagined it. The foreman's eyes searched his face for a long moment, and Jamie felt exposed, like Cole was reading every secret he'd ever kept, every fear, every carefully hidden truth. The intensity of that gaze made Jamie's breath catch, made heat crawl up his neck despite the fear churning in his gut. "Everyone out," Cole said suddenly, his voice sharp, "now." The crew didn't need to be told twice. They scattered like startled birds, boots thundering on the barn floor as they fled through every available exit. Tommy gave Jamie one last worried look before disappearing through the main doors, and then they were alone, just Jamie and Cole and the horses shifting nervously in their stalls, sensing the tension that crackled between the 2 men like electricity before a lightning strike. Jamie's heart hammered so hard he was sure Cole could hear it. He'd done it now, really stepped in it. His mama would have said his mouth was going to get him killed one day, and apparently that day had come. He briefly considered bolting, but his pride wouldn't let him run, wouldn't let him show any more weakness than he already had by letting his hands shake. Cole circled him slowly like a wolf assessing prey, and Jamie forced himself to stand still, to not track the foreman's movement even though every instinct screamed at him to keep those dangerous eyes in sight. When Cole finally stopped, he was directly in front of Jamie again, close enough that Jamie could see the amber flecks in his gray eyes, close enough to notice the small scar that cut through his left eyebrow. "The south pasture," Cole said quietly, "has a spring-fed creek that runs through the center. The grass on the eastern side near the tree line is thick and healthy. I was planning to rotate the herd there first, then gradually expand their range as the rest of the pasture recovers." He paused, his eyes never leaving Jamie's face. "I've walked every inch of this ranch, kid. I know exactly what condition that land is in." Jamie felt his face flush hot with embarrassment. Of course Cole knew. Of course the foreman who'd built his reputation on meticulous attention to detail had already considered what Jamie had said. I'm sorry, sir, I should have. But, Cole interrupted and Jamie's mouth snapped shut. You were right to speak up if you thought I was making a mistake that would hurt the herd. A good ranch hand puts the cattle first, even if it means risking his job. Something that might have been respect flickered in Cole's eyes. Took guts to call me out like that. Jamie blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. You're not firing me. Should I be? Cole's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. Almost. No, sir. Then get back to work, Reeves, and next time you think I'm about to do something stupid, try talking to me in private first. Undermining me in front of the crew isn't going to fly, no matter how right you might be. Yes, sir, I understand. Jamie turned to leave, relief flooding through him so strongly that his knees felt weak. Reeves. He stopped, looking back over his shoulder. Cole was watching him with an expression Jamie couldn't quite read, something intense and searching that made his stomach flip in a way that had nothing to do with fear. We're in Montana. Sorry. Where was your father's ranch? Outside Billings, small operation, just a couple hundred head. Jamie paused, wondering why it mattered. He died 4 years ago, Bank took the ranch 6 months later. Cole nodded slowly, filing the information away. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, sir. As Jamie walked out of the barn on unsteady legs, he didn't see the way Cole's eyes followed him, didn't notice how the foreman's expression shifted into something complicated and troubled. He didn't know that in that moment, Cole Harrington was thinking about a scared kid who'd lost everything but still had the spine to stand up for what he believed in, who looked him in the eye despite being terrified, who made Cole's carefully controlled world tilt slightly off its axis. And he definitely didn't know that he'd just become the most dangerous thing on the Double R ranch, not to the cattle or the horses or the operation itself, but to the walls Cole had spent 28 years building around his heart. Chapter 2: The Unspoken Rules. The bunkhouse smelled like coffee, leather, and the lingering ghost of cigarette smoke despite the no smoking indoors rule that everyone ignored when Richardson wasn't around. Jamie sat on his narrow bed, pulling off his work boots with a groan as every muscle in his body screamed its protest. 3 weeks of 12-hour days had left him sore in places he didn't know could hurt, his hands covered in blisters that had finally started to callous over, his shoulders sunburned despite the hat he wore religiously. You're either the bravest son of a bitch I've ever met or the dumbest. Tommy Rodriguez dropped onto the bed across from him, shaking his head with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. At 35, Tommy was the closest thing the crew had to a voice of reason, a family man who sent most of his paycheck home to his wife and 3 kids in El Paso. I still can't believe Cole didn't fire you on the spot. Jamie shrugged, trying to appear more casual than he felt. I was right, wasn't I? Doesn't matter if you were right. Marcus Webb, a lanky black cowboy with 20 years of experience, looked up from the saddle he was oiling. Cole don't tolerate disrespect, and what you did in front of the crew, that was disrespect even if you didn't mean it that way. I didn't mean any disrespect. Jamie grabbed a clean shirt from his duffel bag, avoiding their eyes. I just thought. That's your problem right there, interrupted Jake Sullivan, sprawling in a chair near the door with his signature toothpick dangling from his lips. You thought. Nobody pays you to think, rookie, they pay you to do what you're told. Jamie bit back his initial response, reminding himself that these men were trying to help him navigate the unspoken rules of ranch life, not attack him. Noted. Tommy studied him for a moment, then sighed. Look, kid, I get it, you know your stuff, anyone with eyes can see that. The way you handle the horses, how you spot problems before they become disasters, you've got good instincts. But Cole, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Cole's different, he don't show it, but he cares about this ranch, about the crew, about doing things right. When you question him in public, it ain't just about being wrong or right, it's about trust. I don't understand. Marcus set down his saddle, giving Jamie his full attention. Cole earned his position the hard way. He started on this ranch when he was 17, worked his way up from stable hand to lead cowboy to foreman. Every man here either respects him or fears him, usually both. But that respect is built on the crew knowing that when Cole makes a decision, he's thought it through from every angle. When you challenge that in front of everyone, you're not just questioning one choice, you're questioning whether he's got what it takes to lead. Jamie absorbed this, guilt settling heavy in his stomach. He hadn't thought about it that way, hadn't considered how his words might undermine Cole's authority beyond the immediate moment. I didn't mean to. We know, Tommy's voice was kind. That's the only reason the rest of us ain't giving you harder time about it. Well, that and the fact that Cole apparently decided not to skin you alive. Speaking of which, Jake interjected, his eyes sharp with curiosity, what the hell did he say to you after he kicked everyone out? We've been dying to know. Jamie hesitated, remembering those intense moments alone in the barn, the way Cole's eyes had seemed to see straight through him. He explained why the south pasture would work, and he told me if I have concerns in the future to bring them to him privately. That's it, Jake sounded disappointed. That's it. Huh, Marcus exchanged a look with Tommy. Well, I'll be damned, maybe Cole's getting soft in his old age. Tommy snorted, Cole Harrington, soft. The day that happens is the day I quit drinking beer. He turned back to Jamie. But seriously, kid, you got lucky, real lucky, don't push it. I won't, Jamie promised, and he meant it. The adrenaline crash from the morning's confrontation had left him shaky and exhausted, and he had no desire to repeat the experience. The fear he'd felt standing up to Cole had been real, visceral, the kind that made his fight-or-flight instincts scream at him to run. But there had been something else too, something he was trying very hard not to think about, the way his heart had raced when Cole stepped close, the heat that had flooded through him when those gray eyes locked onto his, the strange pull he'd felt toward the foreman that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with. No, he wasn't going to go there. That kind of thinking had gotten him into trouble before, had gotten him chased out of his last job when a fellow ranch hand had caught him looking too long at the wrong person. Jamie had learned to keep his head down, to keep his thoughts to himself, to never, ever let anyone see the truth he carried like a weight around his neck. He was good at hiding, he'd had years of practice. The rest of the week passed in a blur of grueling work. The Double R Ranch sprawled across 15,000 acres of Texas hill country with over 2,000 head of cattle, a stable of quarter horses, and a constant stream of tasks that needed doing. Jamie threw himself into the work, trying to prove that he was more than just the kid who'd shot his mouth off to the foreman. He mucked stalls before dawn, repaired fences in the blazing afternoon heat, helped move cattle from one pasture to another, learned to read the subtle signs that indicated a horse was favoring one leg or a cow was ready to calve. His body adapted slowly, muscles hardening, endurance building, the blisters on his hands turning into proper calluses that could grip a rope or a pitchfork handle without tearing. And through it all, he was aware of Cole Harrington in a way that made him deeply uncomfortable. The foreman seemed to be everywhere, checking on the crew's progress, inspecting fences, working alongside the men when an extra pair of hands was needed. He didn't ask anyone to do something he wasn't willing to do himself, and Jamie grudgingly admitted that Marcus had been right about Cole earning his position. The man worked harder than anyone, knew more about ranching than people twice his age, and had a kind of quiet charisma that made people want to follow him. But it was more than that. Jamie found himself tracking Cole's movements without meaning to, his eyes drawn to the way the foreman moved with unconscious grace despite his size, the way his hands handled a horse with gentle firmness, the way sweat made his dark hair curl at the nape of his neck when he'd been working in the sun. He noticed things he had no business noticing, the rare smile that softened Cole's stern features when one of the horses did something clever, the patience he showed when teaching the younger hands a new skill, the way his laugh sounded like distant thunder, low and rolling and far too rare. It was dangerous, this noticing. Jamie knew it was dangerous, but he couldn't seem to stop. Their interactions remained professional, brief exchanges about work assignments or ranch business, but Jamie felt the weight of Cole's attention on him more than once. Sometimes he'd look up from whatever task he was doing to find the foreman watching him with that same intense, unreadable expression from the barn, and the eye contact would stretch for a moment too long before one of them looked away. It didn't mean anything, Jamie told himself. Cole was just keeping an eye on the new guy, making sure he was doing his job properly, that was all. But late at night, lying in his bunk and listening to the other hands snore, Jamie couldn't quite convince himself that was true. There was something in the way Cole looked at him sometimes, something that made his breath catch and his pulse quicken, something that felt almost like recognition. Like Cole saw something in Jamie that no one else did. And that terrified him more than any confrontation ever could. Chapter 3: The Storm. The sky had been threatening rain all day, clouds building on the horizon like bruises, the air growing heavy and electric with approaching weather. Jamie worked alongside Tommy and Marcus to secure equipment and bring the horses in from the far pasture, moving with practiced efficiency even as thunder rumbled in the distance. "Storm's going to be a big one," Marcus observed, scanning the darkening sky. "We better get everything battened down." They were leading the last string of horses toward the barn when the first fat drops of rain began to fall, rapidly increasing from a sprinkle to a downpour. Jamie pulled his hat lower, but within seconds he was soaked through, his shirt plastering to his skin as rain pounded down with surprising violence. "Get those horses inside," Cole's voice cut through the storm as he emerged from the barn already drenched. "Tommy, Marcus, check the south barn, make sure the roof hasn't started leaking again. Reeves, with me." Jamie followed Cole into the main barn, the horses spooked and skittish from the thunder that now cracked overhead like rifle shots. They worked together in efficient silence, getting each horse secured in its stall, checking water buckets, making sure the barn doors were properly latched against the wind that had picked up, howling around the building's corners. Lightning flashed, illuminating the barn's interior in stark white light, and in that moment, Jamie looked over to see Cole struggling with Diablo, the ranch's most temperamental stallion. The horse was rearing, eyes rolling white with fear, and Cole was trying to calm him down while simultaneously avoiding his flailing hooves. Jamie moved without thinking, approaching from Diablo's blind side with his hands raised, making soothing sounds low in his throat. "Easy, boy, easy now, it's just noise, just light. Nothing's going to hurt you." His voice cut through Diablo's panic somehow, and the stallion's ears swiveled toward him, attention caught. Jamie kept talking, kept moving slowly closer until he could lay a gentle hand on the horse's sweat-slicked neck. "That's it, you're all right, we've got you, nice and safe in here." Diablo shuddered, still nervous but no longer panicking, and Cole was able to guide him into his stall and secure the door. For a moment, they both just stood there, breathing hard, adrenaline pumping through their systems. "Good work," Cole said quietly. "Not many people can calm Diablo down when he's spooked. My dad had a horse like him, temperamental but smart, you just have to speak their language." Jamie pushed wet hair out of his eyes, suddenly very aware that they were alone in the barn, the storm raging outside creating a cocoon of isolation. Cole was staring at him again, that intense look that made Jamie feel like he was being catalogued, understood in ways that should be impossible. Water dripped from the foreman's hair, running down the strong column of his throat, and Jamie had to force his eyes away, had to remind himself to breathe normally. "You're full of surprises, Reeves. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, sir?" "Haven't decided yet," but there was something in Cole's voice, a warmth that hadn't been there before, and when Jamie risked a glance at his face, he found Cole almost smiling. Thunder crashed overhead, so loud and close that the barn seemed to shake. Diablo whinnied nervously, but the other horses remained calm, trusting in their shelter. Rain hammered on the roof like thousands of tiny drums, and somewhere in the distance, Jamie heard the crack of a tree branch giving way to the wind. "We should check the other buildings," Cole said, but he didn't move, didn't break eye contact. "Yes, sir." Jamie didn't move either. The moment stretched between them, charged with something that had nothing to do with the storm. Jamie's heart was pounding again, that same mix of fear and something else, something that felt dangerous and exciting and completely forbidden. Cole's eyes had darkened, the gray turning almost slate-colored in the dim barn light, and there was a tension in his jaw that Jamie couldn't interpret. Then lightning flashed again, and Cole seemed to shake himself out of whatever trance had held him. "Come on, let's make sure the equipment barn is secure." They ran through the driving rain, heads down against the wind, boots splashing through puddles that had already formed in the yard. The equipment barn was on the far side of the property, and by the time they reached it, Jamie was shivering despite the warm Texas night, his teeth wanting to chatter. Cole wrestled the door open against the wind, and they stumbled inside, gasping for breath. This barn was darker than the main one, filled with tractors and tools and equipment that cast strange shadows in the gloom. Cole found a battery-powered lantern and clicked it on, illuminating the space in pale lead light. "Check the west wall," he instructed. "Last storm we had water coming in through some gaps in the siding." Jamie made his way along the wall, running his hands over the wood looking for any signs of leaks. The rain was loud even in here, a constant roar that made conversation difficult, but he could hear Cole moving around on the other side of the barn doing his own inspection. "Cole," he had to shout to be heard, "there's water coming in here, looks like the caulking gave way." The foreman appeared at his side with surprising speed, assessing the problem with a practiced eye. Damn, we'll have to get some buckets under it, then fix it properly when the storm passes. They positioned several large buckets to catch the worst of the leaks, then stood back to make sure they'd done the job. Jamie was hyper-aware of how close Cole was standing, close enough that he could feel body heat despite their wet clothes, close enough to catch the scent of rain and leather and something uniquely Cole. "You're cold," it wasn't a question. Cole was looking at him with concern, taking in the way Jamie was trying unsuccessfully to control his shivering. "I'm fine, sir." "Like hell you are," Cole shrugged out of his jacket, somehow less soaked than the rest of him, and draped it over Jamie's shoulders before he could protest. "Hypothermia's no joke, even in summer, wear it." The jacket was warm from Cole's body and Jamie pulled it closer instinctively, breathing in the scent that clung to the fabric. "Thank you." "Don't mention it." They should have left then, should have made their way back to the bunkhouse and dry clothes, but something kept them there in the dim barn, the storm howling outside, the world reduced to just the two of them and the sound of rain drumming on the roof. "Why did you really come to the Double R?" Cole asked suddenly, his voice quiet but carrying clearly in a brief lull in the storm. "A kid with your skills could get work anywhere, why here?" Jamie tensed, the question cutting too close to truths he wasn't ready to share, needed a fresh start. "From what? Does it matter?" Cole was quiet for a long moment, studying Jamie's face in the lantern light. Maybe I just want to know more about the kid who had the guts to tell me I was wrong in front of my entire crew." "I told you I was sorry about that." "I know, but that's not what I asked." Jamie sighed, weighing how much truth he could afford to share. "My last job, things got complicated. Someone found out something about me they shouldn't have and I had to leave. Fast." He met Cole's eyes, trying to convey without words that some secrets were too dangerous to speak aloud. Understanding flickered across Cole's face and something else, something that looked almost like sympathy. "I see." "Do you?" Jamie couldn't keep the bitterness out of his voice. "Do you really see, or are you just saying that?" "I see more than you think, Reeves." Cole's voice was low, intense, and there was a weight to his words that made Jamie's breath catch. "I see a kid running from something that scared him enough to leave everything behind. I see someone trying real hard to keep his head down and not be noticed. I see." He stopped abruptly, seeming to think better of whatever he'd been about to say. "What?" Jamie heard himself ask. "What do you see?" Cole's eyes searched his face and the air between them felt electric, charged with more than just the storm. "Someone who reminds me of myself at that age, someone who's carrying something heavy and thinks he has to do it alone." Jamie's throat felt tight. No one had really seen him in so long that the experience was almost painful. "Cole." "It's all right." Cole's hand came up, almost touching Jamie's shoulder, but he stopped just short of contact, his fingers hovering in the air between them. "Whatever you're running from, whatever you think you need to hide, you don't have to explain it to me. Just know that on this ranch you're judged by your work and your character, nothing else, understood?" Jamie nodded, not trusting his voice. Cole's hand finally made contact, squeezing his shoulder briefly before dropping away, and even that simple touch sent warmth flooding through Jamie's chest, made him want things he had no right to want. "We should head back," Cole said, his voice rougher than usual. "Storm's not letting up, but we've done what we can out here." They ran back through the rain, not speaking, the moment in the barn hanging between them like a question neither was brave enough to ask. By the time they reached the bunkhouse, Jamie was shaking again, but he wasn't sure if it was from cold or from something else entirely. At the door, Cole stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Reeves, Jamie." It was the first time Cole had used his first name, and hearing it in that deep voice made something flip in Jamie's stomach. "Be careful, all right? Some truths are worth protecting, but some secrets can hurt you if you keep them locked up too long." Before Jamie could ask what he meant, Cole was gone, disappearing into the rain toward his own cabin on the far side of the property, leaving Jamie standing alone in the storm with a borrowed jacket and a heart that wouldn't stop racing. Chapter 4: The Shift. Something changed after the storm. Jamie couldn't quite put his finger on it, couldn't name the subtle shift in the way Cole interacted with him, but he felt it nonetheless. The foreman still assigned him tasks, still maintained professional distance, still spoke to him with the same authority he used with all the hands. But there were moments, fleeting, easily missed if you weren't paying attention, where Cole's eyes would linger a fraction too long, where his voice would soften almost imperceptibly, where he'd find reasons to work near Jamie even when logic said he should be elsewhere. Or maybe Jamie was imagining it. Maybe he was seeing what he wanted to see, projecting his own confused feelings onto a man who was just being a decent boss looking out for his crew. God knew Jamie's judgment wasn't exactly reliable when it came to reading these particular kinds of signals. He tried to focus on work, to lose himself in the familiar rhythms of ranch life. The summer heat intensified, turning the days into marathons of sweat and sun and dust, the kind of work that left you too exhausted to think about anything beyond a cold shower and a soft bed. Jamie's body continued to adapt, getting stronger, more resilient, his skin tanning to a deep bronze that made his green eyes stand out in sharp contrast. "You're fitting in real good," Tommy told him one evening as they sat on the bunkhouse porch, watching the sun sink below the hills in a spectacular display of orange and gold. "Crew's starting to trust you, even Jake stopped calling you rookie." "Only took a month and a half," Jamie replied with a small smile. "That's fast for this bunch, we don't warm up to new people easy." Tommy took a long drink from his beer, then offered the cooler to Jamie. "You earned it though, the way you handle the horses, especially the difficult ones, that's not something you can teach, you've got a gift." Jamie accepted a beer, the cold bottle sweating in his hand. "My dad used to say horses can sense what kind of person you are, they trust honest people, people who aren't trying to hide what they're feeling." "Your dad sounds like he was a smart man." "He was," Jamie's throat tightened around the words, "he was the best man I ever knew." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the day fade into twilight. Other hands drifted by, Marcus heading to his truck for the drive into town, Jake and a couple of others setting up a card game inside, the familiar sounds of men settling in for the evening creating a backdrop of normalcy that Jamie was starting to cherish. "Can I ask you something?" Tommy's voice was carefully casual. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to." Jamie tensed instinctively. "What?" "That thing you told Cole about someone finding something out at your last job, was it bad, like are you in some kind of trouble?" "No, nothing illegal if that's what you're asking." Jamie stared at his beer bottle, watching condensation run down the glass. "Just personal, the kind of thing that makes people uncomfortable if they're not open-minded." Tommy was quiet for a long moment. "Listen kid, I'm going to be straight with you because I like you and I don't want to see you get hurt. This ranch, these men were good people, but we're also Texas Cowboys. We've got our views, our beliefs, and some of those beliefs are pretty set in stone." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "If there's something about you that might cause problems, you might want to think about how you handle that. Not saying you should hide who you are, just saying you should be smart about it." Jamie's heart was pounding. Did Tommy know? Had he been that obvious? "I appreciate the advice." "I'm serious, Jamie. There are some things that folks out here just don't accept, no matter how good you are at your job. And if you're what I think you might be," Tommy stopped, shaking his head. "Hell, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. Just be careful, all right? Some of the hands, they're good men, but they've got blind spots. And some towns around here, they're not kind to people who are different." "I know," Jamie's voice was barely above a whisper. "Believe me, I know." Tommy clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and warning. "For what it's worth, I don't give a damn who you are or what you're running from as long as you do your job and treat people right, but not everyone thinks like me." After Tommy went inside, Jamie sat alone in the gathering darkness, his mind churning. He'd been so careful, so cautious about hiding his truth, but maybe he wasn't as good at it as he thought. If Tommy had picked up on something, who else might have noticed? And more importantly, what would happen if the wrong person figured it out? He thought about Cole's words in the equipment barn during the storm. "Some secrets can hurt you if you keep them locked up too long." But what was the alternative? Speaking his truth openly in a place like this would get him fired at best, beaten, or worse at worst. He'd seen it happen before, had heard the stories, had learned young that people like him had to be invisible to survive. But God, he was tired of being invisible, tired of watching every word, every gesture, every glance. Tired of the loneliness that came from keeping everyone at arm's length, never letting anyone close enough to see the real him. "You all right out here?" Jamie nearly jumped out of his skin. Cole had appeared silently, standing at the base of the porch steps with his hands in his pockets, his expression concerned. "Fine sir, just thinking. Mind if I join you?" It wasn't really a question, Cole was already climbing the steps, but Jamie appreciated the pretense of asking anyway. The foreman settled into the chair Tommy had vacated, his long legs stretched out in front of him, and for a few minutes they sat in silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. "Tommy cornering you about something?" Cole asked eventually. "Not cornering, just giving me some advice." "What kind of advice?" Jamie hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "The kind that reminds me to be careful who I trust." Cole made a sound that might have been agreement or understanding. "Tommy's a good man. If he's telling you to be careful, he's probably got a reason." "He does." More silence, but this time it felt weighted, full of things neither of them was saying. Jamie could feel Cole's eyes on him, studying him in that way that made him feel exposed and seen simultaneously. "I meant what I said during the storm," Cole said quietly. "About being judged by your work and your character. I meant that, Jamie, whatever else is going on, whatever you're worried about, that's what matters here. Even if the other hands don't see it that way. I'm the foreman, what I say goes." There was steel in Cole's voice, an absolute certainty that made Jamie believe him. "Anyone who's got a problem with one of my crew answers to me, and trust me, they don't want to do that." Jamie felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying since the conversation with Tommy. "Thank you." "Nothing to thank me for, just stating facts." Cole stood, stretching muscles that had been worked hard all day. "Get some sleep, Reeves. We've got an early start tomorrow, moving the herd to that south pasture you were so concerned about." "The one you'd already planned properly?" Jamie couldn't help the slight smile. Cole's lips twitched. "That's the one. Want to make sure you see I knew what I was doing." After Cole left, Jamie sat for a while longer, turning the conversation over in his mind. There had been something in the foreman's tone, something almost protective, that made Jamie's chest feel tight and warm. He thought about the way Cole had looked at him just now, the way he'd said Jamie's first name like it mattered, like he mattered. Dangerous thoughts, dangerous feelings. But as Jamie finally headed inside to his bunk, he couldn't quite make himself regret them. Chapter 5: The Almost. The south pasture move went smoothly, proving Cole right about the grass quality and water access. Jamie worked hard trying to demonstrate that he understood ranch operations better now that he'd learned from his initial mistake. Cole seemed satisfied with the crew's performance, and by the time they got the herd settled, the sun was setting in spectacular fashion, painting the sky in shades of crimson and violet. "Good work today," Cole called out to the assembled hands. "Head on back, first rounds on me if anyone wants to hit Murphy's tonight." A cheer went up from the crew. Murphy's was the local bar, a rough-and-tumble place where ranch hands and oil workers mingled, where the beer was cheap and the music was loud and fights broke out with predictable regularity. Jamie had been once with the crew and found it overwhelming. Too many people, too much noise, too many chances for his carefully maintained walls to slip. "You coming, kid?" Jake asked as they rode back toward the ranch. "Cole buying drinks is a rare thing, you should take advantage." "Maybe next time I'm beat." Tommy gave him a knowing look but didn't push. "Suit yourself, more beer for the rest of us." By the time Jamie had taken care of his horse and grabbed a quick shower, the bunkhouse was empty, the other hands having piled into trucks and headed for town. He should have felt relieved to have the place to himself, but instead, he felt oddly lonely. The silence pressing in on him in a way that made his chest tight. He was sitting on the porch again, apparently his new favorite spot, when he heard footsteps approaching through the darkness. His hand instinctively went to the knife on his belt before he recognized Cole's distinctive stride. "Thought you were going to Murphy's," Jamie called out. "Changed my mind." Cole climbed the steps, and in the dim light from the bunkhouse windows, Jamie could see he'd showered and changed into clean clothes, his dark hair still damp. "Figured someone should stick around in case anything comes up with the herd." "They're settled, should be fine." "Probably." Cole leaned against the porch railing close enough that Jamie could smell his soap, something clean and woodsy. "But you never know." They stood there in companionable silence for a moment, the night air warm and full of cricket song. Jamie's awareness of Cole's proximity was almost painful, every nerve in his body seeming to focus on the man standing just a few feet away. "Why didn't you go?" Cole asked suddenly. "To Murphy's, I mean, the crew likes you, you'd have a good time." "Not really my scene." "What is your scene?" Jamie laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Don't really have one anymore, haven't for a while." Cole turned to look at him directly, and even in the darkness, Jamie could feel the intensity of that gaze. That's a lonely way to live. Safer, though. Safer from what? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning that Jamie wasn't sure how to interpret. He thought about deflecting, changing the subject, retreating into the safe banality of work talk. But something about the darkness, about the isolation, about the way Cole was looking at him made him want to be honest just this once. From people figuring out that I'm not who they think I am. Cole was very still. And who do they think you are? Just another cowboy, just another ranch hand trying to make a living. Jamie's voice was barely above a whisper, someone normal. And you're not. Jamie's heart was hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. This was it, the moment where he could either retreat back into safety or take a leap into terrifying honesty. I don't know if I'd call myself normal, no. Normal's overrated anyway. Cole moved closer, and now there were only inches between them, close enough that Jamie could see the pulse beating in his throat, could count the shades of gray in his eyes. You want to know what I think? What? The word came out shaky. I think you're exactly who you're supposed to be. I think whoever made you feel like you had to hide is an idiot who couldn't recognize something good when they saw it. Cole's voice was low, rough with some emotion Jamie couldn't name. And I think you've been running so long you've forgotten there might be places where you don't have to. Jamie couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at Cole's face, trying to understand what was happening, what this meant. Cole. Tell me I'm wrong? Cole's hand came up, hovering near Jamie's face the way it had in the equipment barn, not quite touching but close enough for Jamie to feel the heat of his palm. Tell me I'm misreading this and I'll back off. I'll pretend this conversation never happened and everything will go back to normal. What if I don't want normals? The words escaped before Jamie could stop them, and he saw something flare in Cole's eyes, heat and hunger, and a mirror of his own desperate longing. Cole's hand finally made contact, cupping Jamie's jaw with surprising gentleness, his thumb brushing along Jamie's cheekbone in a gesture so tender it made Jamie's throat ache. Then what do you want? Cole's voice was barely audible. This. Jamie leaned into the touch, letting his eyes flutter closed for just a moment. Whatever this is, even though it's probably the stupidest thing I could want. Yeah, Cole's thumb continued its slow path along Jamie's skin. Probably is. They stood frozen like that, balanced on the knife edge between possibility and disaster, the night air thick with tension and unspoken promises. Jamie could feel Cole's breath on his face, could feel the heat radiating from his body, could feel his own heart trying to beat its way out of his chest. Cole leaned in slowly, giving Jamie every opportunity to pull away, to say no, to retreat to safety. But Jamie didn't move except to tilt his face up slightly, an invitation he'd never been brave enough to offer anyone before. Their lips were a breath apart, close enough that Jamie could feel the ghost of contact, could imagine how it would feel to close that final distance and... A truck door slammed somewhere in the distance, followed by raucous laughter and the sound of the crew returning early from town. Cole jerked back like he'd been burned, putting several feet between them in a heartbeat, his breathing harsh and uneven. Jake must have gotten in a fight and got them kicked out again, Cole said, his voice not quite steady. I need to go make sure everyone's all right. Cole, wait. But Cole was already gone, disappearing into the darkness with quick strides that spoke of flight more than purpose. Jamie stood alone on the porch, his jaw still tingling where Cole had touched him, his lips aching with the kiss that almost happened, his whole body trembling with adrenaline and desire and bone-deep fear of what they'd almost done. Of what he desperately wanted to finish. Chapter 6: The Distance. Cole avoided him after that night. It was subtle enough that the other hands probably didn't notice, but Jamie felt the absence like a physical ache. The foreman still gave him assignments, still checked on his work, still maintained the basic professional interactions required by their respective positions. But the warmth was gone, the lingering looks, the moments of connection that had been building between them. Cole had retreated behind walls that seemed even thicker than before, and Jamie didn't know how to reach him without risking everything they'd both worked so hard to build: Cole's reputation, his own safety, the fragile balance that kept this job bearable. You and Cole have a falling out? Marcus asked one day as they worked on repairing a section of fence that had been damaged by wild hogs. Noticed he's been keeping his distance lately. Not that I know of, Jamie hammered another nail with more force than necessary. Maybe he's just busy. Maybe Marcus didn't sound convinced, or maybe something spooked him. Jamie's hands stilled on the fence post. What do you mean? I mean, Cole's a good man, but he's got his demons like anybody else. Sometimes he gets close to people and then pulls back hard when things start feeling too, Marcus trailed off, searching for the right word. Too real, I guess. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Not personally, but I've worked with Cole for 5 years now, seen him do this before, get friendly with someone then shut down when the friendship starts meaning something. Marcus gave him a penetrating look. Not saying that's what's happening here, just saying if it is, don't take it personal, it's his issue, not yours. Jamie absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with the man who'd touched his face so gently, who'd looked at him like he was something precious. What's he afraid of? Same thing we're all afraid of, I reckon, getting hurt, losing control, letting someone see the parts of himself he keeps hidden. Marcus returned to his work, driving nails with steady precision. We all got secrets, Jamie. Cole's got more than most and he guards them fierce. The conversation stayed with Jamie for days afterward, coloring every interaction with Cole, every carefully maintained distance, every moment when their eyes met and Cole looked away first. He wanted to be angry, wanted to resent the foreman for starting something he wasn't brave enough to finish, but mostly he just felt sad for both of them, for the connection they'd touched briefly and then let slip away. A week after the almost kiss, Richardson called a crew meeting to announce that he was expanding the operation, buying the neighboring property and its small herd. It meant more work, more responsibility, and more hands needed to manage everything. Cole's going to be overseeing the integration, Richardson said, his weathered face creased with satisfaction. Which means he'll be spending most of his time over at the Walker place for the next month or so. Jake Sullivan will be acting foreman here at the main ranch. Jamie's heart sank. A month. Cole would be gone for a month and the fragile thing between them, whatever it had been, would wither and die from neglect and distance. He watched Cole's face during the announcement, but the foreman's expression remained neutral, professional, giving nothing away. If Cole had any feelings about being sent away, about leaving Jamie, he hid them perfectly. That evening, Jamie worked later than usual, finishing tasks that didn't strictly need finishing, avoiding the bunkhouse and the inevitable questions from the crew about how he felt about Jake being in charge. He was in the main barn, checking on a mare that had seemed slightly off during the day's work, when he heard footsteps behind him. She doing all right? Cole's voice made Jamie's shoulders tense. Yeah, just wanted to make sure. Jamie kept his attention on the horse, not trusting himself to look at Cole without his face betraying too much. Thought you'd be packing. Not much to pack, most of my stuff will stay here. Cole moved closer and Jamie could feel him like heat at his back. Jamie. Don't. Jamie's voice came out harsher than he'd intended. Don't apologize or explain or whatever you're about to do, I get it. It was a moment of stupidity and we both know it can't happen. Message received. That's not what I was going to say. Then what? Jamie finally turned to face him, all the hurt and confusion and longing of the past week boiling over. What were you going to say, Cole? That you're scared, that this thing between us is too risky, that I'm too young or too inexperienced or too much of a liability to your reputation? Just tell me so I can move on. Cole's jaw was tight, his eyes stormy with emotion. I was going to say I'm sorry for avoiding you, for making you feel like what happened between us was a mistake. Wasn't it? I don't know. Cole ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. Christ, Jamie, I don't know what it was. All I know is that I can't stop thinking about you and that scares the hell out of me. Jamie's breath caught. Why? Because I've spent 28 years being careful, being smart, building a life where I'm respected and successful and safe. Cole's voice dropped lower, rough with emotion. And then you showed up with your smart mouth and your brave heart and your eyes that see too damn much, and suddenly careful doesn't seem as important as it used to. Cole. But it has to be important. Cole stepped closer and the pain in his expression made Jamie's chest ache. Because if people find out, if they suspect I lose everything. My job, my reputation, maybe worse, and you lose it too. Is that fair? Is that what you want? I want you to stop assuming you know what's best for me. Jamie met his eyes steadily. I'm not a kid, Cole. I've been hiding who I am my whole life. I know the risks probably better than you do. I've lived with the fear of being discovered, of being hurt, of losing everything. I don't need you to protect me from a reality I already know." "Then what do you need?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility and danger. Jamie thought about lying, about saying he needed nothing, that he'd be fine with Cole leaving for a month and them both pretending nothing had happened. But he was so tired of lying. "I need you to be honest with me. I need you to stop running every time something real happens between us. His voice cracked slightly. "I need to know I'm not alone in this, that I'm not crazy for feeling what I feel." Cole closed the remaining distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame Jamie's face with a tenderness that made Jamie's eyes burn. "You're not alone, you're not crazy, and you're sure as hell not nothing to me, no matter how hard I've tried to convince myself otherwise." "Then why are you leaving?" "Because Richardson's sending me, because it's my job, because—" Cole's thumb traced along Jamie's jaw, the gesture achingly familiar from that night on the porch. "Because maybe some distance will help me figure out how to do this without destroying both our lives. And if you can't figure it out, then at least we tried to be smart about it." Cole leaned his forehead against Jamie's and they stood there breathing the same air, close enough to kiss but not quite crossing that line. "1 month, that's all, and when I get back we'll talk, really talk, about what this is and what it could be and whether the risk is worth it." "Promise." "I promise." Cole's hands slipped from Jamie's face and the loss of contact felt like grief. "Be careful while I'm gone. Jake's a good man, but he doesn't always think before he acts. If anything feels wrong, if anyone gives you trouble, you call me, doesn't matter what time it is. I can take care of myself." "I know you can, but you don't have to, not anymore." Cole stepped back, putting professional distance between them again, but his eyes held a warmth that made Jamie's heart race. "1 month, Jamie, we can do this." After Cole left, Jamie stood alone in the barn, touching his own face where Cole's hands had been, trying to memorize the feeling. 1 month felt like an eternity, but it also felt like a promise, like the first honest thing between them. He just hoped they'd both survive it. Chapter 7: The Substitution. Jake Sullivan was everything Cole wasn't: loud, impulsive, quick to laugh and quicker to anger. As acting foreman, he ran the ranch with an enthusiasm that bordered on chaos, making decisions on the fly and expecting the crew to adapt without complaint. "Come on, boys," he'd shout, his energy infectious even when his judgment was questionable. "Double R ain't built for second place, let's show Richardson what we can do." The crew mostly tolerated Jake's leadership style, understanding it was temporary and that Cole would be back soon enough. But Jamie found himself missing Cole's steady presence more than he'd expected, the quiet competence, the way he made everything seem under control even when it wasn't, the sense of safety that came from working under someone who genuinely cared about his people. The work continued. Fences needed mending, cattle needed tending, horses needed training. Jamie threw himself into it with renewed focus, trying to fill the hollow ache in his chest with exhaustion and accomplishment. He stayed late most evenings, volunteering for extra shifts, becoming the go-to person when something difficult needed doing. "You trying to kill yourself?" Tommy asked one night as they worked by floodlight to bring in a cow who'd gotten stuck in a dry creek bed. "You've been working double shifts for 2 weeks straight." "Just earning my keep." "You earned that your first week here. This is something else." Tommy gave him a knowing look. "This is you running from something." Jamie didn't answer, focusing on securing the rope around the distressed cow. With combined effort, they managed to coax her out of the creek bed and back toward the herd, her calf following anxiously behind. "Cole called earlier," Tommy said as they walked back toward the ranch. "Asked about you specifically." Jamie's heart jumped. "What did he say?" "Wanted to know how you were doing, if you were keeping yourself safe." Tommy's expression was unreadable in the darkness. "Told him you were working yourself half to death but otherwise seemed fine." "I am fine." "Sure you are, and I'm the Queen of England." Tommy stopped walking, forcing Jamie to stop too. "Listen, I don't know what's going on between you and Cole and I'm not asking, but whatever it is, it's got you both twisted up in knots. Cole's been gone 2 weeks and you look like you've lost your best friend." "Maybe I have." The words came out before Jamie could stop them and Tommy's expression softened. "Yeah, maybe you have." He clapped Jamie on the shoulder. For what it's worth, Cole looked pretty torn up about leaving too. Richardson noticed it, asked me if something was wrong. I told him Cole's just particular about how things get run, doesn't like being away from the main ranch. Thank you for covering for him. Wasn't covering, it's the truth, just not all of it. Tommy started walking again. We all got our truths we don't share, Jamie. The trick is figuring out which ones are worth protecting and which ones are just keeping you lonely. Jamie thought about that long into the night, lying in his bunk and staring at the ceiling while the other hands snored around him. Which truths was he protecting? The truth of who he was, yes, that was survival, that was necessary in a world that didn't always accept people like him. But what about the truth of what he felt for Cole? Was that worth protecting, or was it just keeping them both trapped in a half-life of almosts and what-ifs? His phone buzzed with a text message, and Jamie's heart raced when he saw Cole's name. How are things? Simple, professional, but coming at midnight it felt like more. Jamie typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, managing, miss having a real foreman though, Jake's enthusiasm is exhausting. The response came quickly, tell me about it. Had to talk him down from trying to break that new Mustang without proper preparation. You keeping him from doing anything too stupid. Trying, not always succeeding. Do your best, that's all I ask. Jamie stared at the screen, wanting to say more, wanting to ask if Cole missed him too, if he was thinking about their conversation in the barn, if a month still felt as long to him as it did to Jamie. But before he could formulate the right words, another message came through. I think about that night on the porch more than I should. Jamie's breath caught, his fingers trembled slightly as he typed, me too. 2 more weeks, we'll figure this out. Promise. Promise, now get some sleep. You're going to need your energy to keep Jake from burning the place down. Jamie smiled despite himself, despite the ache in his chest, despite everything. Good night, Cole. Good night, Jamie. After that, the texts came regularly, never during work hours, always late at night when the rest of the crew was asleep. They talked about everything and nothing. Ranch, business, difficult horses, childhood memories, favorite books, the small details of daily life that built intimacy in ways neither of them had expected. Cole told him about growing up in a small town where being different meant being invisible, about leaving home at 17 with nothing but a duffel bag and determination. Jamie shared stories about his father, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the fear that had driven him from Montana to Texas. They didn't talk directly about what they were to each other, didn't name the thing growing between them through pixels and distance. But the conversations felt significant anyway, like they were building something real, one careful message at a time. You've been smiling at your phone a lot lately, Marcus observed one evening. Got yourself a girlfriend somewhere. Jamie's smile faltered, something like that. Good for you, man needs someone to talk to besides horses and cowboys. Marcus gave him an approving nod. Just be careful, all right, long-distance stuff can be tricky. If only he knew how tricky. Chapter 8, The Complication. 3 weeks into Cole's absence, everything went wrong. It started with a storm, not rain this time, but wind that screamed across the property like a living thing, tearing at roofs and fences and anything not securely fastened down. Jake rallied the crew to secure what they could, but in the chaos, several horses panicked and broke through a weakened section of fence, scattering across the property. Spread out, Jake shouted over the wind. We need to find them before they hurt themselves or get too far. Jamie ended up paired with a hand named Derek, a burly man in his 40s who'd always been professionally distant but never actively unfriendly. They rode out toward the western section of the property, scanning for any sign of the missing horses. There, Derek pointed toward a cluster of trees where 2 of the horses had taken shelter. They dismounted and approached carefully, not wanting to spook the already frightened animals. Jamie managed to get a lead rope on the mare, speaking softly to calm her. Easy, girl, let's get you home. You're good with them, Derek said, genuine admiration in his voice. Better than most hands I've seen. Thanks, my dad taught me. They led the horses back slowly, fighting against the wind. They were almost to the barn when Derek spoke again, his tone casual but with an edge that made Jamie's instincts prickle. Jake mentioned Cole's been asking about you specifically, checking in, making sure you're all right. Derek glanced at him sideways. That's interesting, don't you think, the foreman taking such a personal interest in one particular hand? Jamie kept his voice neutral. Cole takes an interest in all his crew. Not like this. I've worked under Cole for 3 years now, never seen him pay this much attention to anyone. Derek's eyes were sharp, assessing. Makes a man wonder what makes you so special. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, just making an observation. Derek's smile didn't reach his eyes. But you know how people talk, especially when a foreman and a young hand seem awful close. Jamie's blood ran cold. There's nothing inappropriate happening. Didn't say there was, but appearances matter, don't they? Especially in places like this. Derek's tone remained conversational, but there was a threat lurking beneath the surface. Wouldn't want anyone getting the wrong idea about you or Cole, could cause a lot of problems. They'd reached the barn and Jamie focused on getting the horses settled, his mind racing. Was Derek threatening him, testing him, or just being an asshole who'd noticed something and wanted to make Jamie squirm? Derek, Jamie turned to face him directly, keeping his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. I don't know what you think you've figured out, but you're wrong. Cole's my boss, that's all. If you say so? Derek's smirk said he didn't believe it for a second. But like I said, people talk, might want to be more careful about those late-night phone calls. Walls are thin in the bunkhouse. He walked away, leaving Jamie standing in the barn with shaking hands and a heart that wouldn't stop racing. Derek had heard him talking to Cole, had probably heard enough to piece together that their relationship was more than professional, even if he didn't have concrete proof. Jamie pulled out his phone with trembling fingers, typing a message to Cole, "We have a problem." The response came within minutes, Cole clearly sensing the urgency. What's wrong? Derek knows, or suspects, he just made it pretty clear he's noticed something between us. A long pause, then, shit, what exactly did he say? Jamie relayed the conversation, his fingers flying over the keys. By the time he finished, his phone was ringing, Cole's name flashing on the screen. Are you somewhere private? Cole's voice was tight with concern. Yeah, everyone's still out securing the property. Listen to me carefully, Derek's an asshole, but he's not stupid. If he suspects something, he'll use it for leverage, better assignments, better pay, whatever he thinks he can get. Cole's breathing was harsh over the line. We need to be smarter than he is. How? He's right about the phone calls. I haven't been careful enough. This isn't your fault, it's mine for calling you so much, for not thinking about who might overhear. There was a pause, and when Cole spoke again, his voice was rough. Maybe we need to cool things down, put some distance between us until this blows over. The words hit Jamie like a physical blow. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter if it puts us both at risk. Bullshit, Jamie's voice came out harder than he'd intended. What you want matters, what I want matters, and I'm tired of other people's prejudices dictating how we live our lives. Jamie. No, I get it, okay? I get that you're scared, I'm scared too, but I'm not going to let some asshole like Derek make me hide even more than I already do. Jamie's grip on the phone was white-knuckled. We haven't done anything wrong, we've been talking on the phone, that's it. There's nothing he can prove, nothing concrete he can use against us. Unless he decides to lie. The truth of that statement settled heavy between them. Derek could make up whatever story he wanted, and in a place like this, surrounded by men who might not be accepting of the truth, lies could be just as damaging as proof. What do we do? Jamie asked quietly. We stick to the story, we're foreman and crew member, nothing more, professional relationship. Cole's voice was strained. And we stop the phone calls, at least until I get back and we can figure this out face to face. 1 more week. 1 more week, Cole echoed. And Jamie, be careful around Derek, don't give him any ammunition. After they hung up, Jamie stood alone in the barn, feeling more isolated than he had since arriving at the Double R. The thing he'd been building with Cole, fragile and uncertain as it was, felt like it was slipping through his fingers, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. But damn if he was going to let Derek win without a fight. Chapter 9: The Confrontation Redux. Derek watched Jamie like a hawk for the next few days, his eyes constantly tracking his movements, a knowing smirk on his face whenever their paths crossed. Jamie maintained professional distance, focused on his work, gave the man nothing to latch onto. But the scrutiny was wearing, constant stress that made his shoulders tight and his sleep restless. Derek giving you trouble? Tommy asked one morning as they worked side by side mucking stalls. Nothing I can't handle. That's not what I asked. Tommy's voice was serious. He's been watching you like you owe him money. What's that about? Jamie considered how much to reveal. He thinks he's figured something out about me, something he might try to use. Tommy was quiet for a moment, then sighed. Let me guess, he's figured out you're not exactly conventional in your interests. Jamie's hands stilled on his pitchfork. How long have you known? Since about your second week here. Wasn't hard to pick up on if you know what to look for. Tommy's expression was kind, understanding. And before you panic, I don't care. Like I said before, you do your job and treat people right. That's what matters to me. Does anyone else know? Marcus suspects, I think, but he's got the same philosophy I do. None of his business as long as you're a good hand. Tommy leaned on his pitchfork, meeting Jamie's eyes directly. Derek, though, Derek's the type to make it his business. You watch yourself around him. I am good, and if he tries anything, and I mean anything, you come to me or Marcus will handle it. The solidarity made Jamie's throat tight. Why are you being so nice to me? Because everybody deserves at least one person in their corner, kid, and right now you look like you could use a few more than you've got. Tommy returned to his work, then added almost casually, Cole knows too, doesn't he? That's why he's been so protective. Jamie didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. Thought so? Tommy smiled slightly. For what it's worth, I think you're good for him. Haven't seen Cole care about anyone like that ever actually. It's complicated. The best things usually are. That evening, Jake called an impromptu crew meeting in the barn. Everyone gathered, speculation running through the assembled hands about what was important enough to warrant pulling them from dinner. Jake stood in front of them looking uncharacteristically serious. I'm going to cut right to it. There's been some talk among the crew, gossip about inappropriate relationships, suggestions that some people might not belong on a ranch like this. His eyes flicked to Derek, then to Jamie. I want to make something clear. I don't give a damn who you are or what you do in your private time as long as it doesn't affect your work. This crew functions because we trust each other, and that trust breaks down when people start spreading rumors and making accusations without proof. Derek straightened, his face reddening. Are you saying I'm lying? I'm saying gossip is poison and I won't tolerate it on my watch. Jake's voice was steel. We got a ranch to run, cattle to tend, work that needs doing. If you've got time to speculate about other people's personal lives, I've got more work I can assign you. But nothing, this conversation is over. Everyone get back to what you were doing. The crew dispersed slowly and Jamie caught Jake's eye, mouthing a silent thank you. The acting foreman nodded almost imperceptibly, then turned his attention to Derek, who was glowering in the corner. As Jamie headed back to the bunkhouse, Tommy fell into step beside him. Jake's a good man when it counts. Yeah, Jamie's voice was rough with emotion. Yeah, he is. You should call Cole, let him know what happened. Can't, we agreed to stop the phone calls until he gets back. Tommy snorted. That's the dumbest thing I've heard all week, and I've been listening to Jake's plans for reorganizing the feed storage. Call him, he'll want to know. So Jamie did, stepping outside into the warm Texas night and dialing Cole's number with shaking fingers. The foreman answered on the second ring. Jamie, is everything okay? Yeah, actually, yeah. Jamie filled him in on the crew meeting, on Jake's unexpected support, on the way Derek had been shut down before he could spread more poison. I know we said no more calls, but I thought you should know. I'm glad you called. Cole's voice was warm, relieved. And I'm glad Jake handled it. He might be a disaster at organization, but he's good with people when it matters. 5 more days. 5 more days, Cole agreed, and then we figure out what comes next. I'm scared, Cole. Me too, but Jamie, I'm also excited, terrified and excited, which is a weird combination, but there it is. Cole's voice dropped lower, intimate. We're going to figure this out together. Promise. Promise. After they hung up, Jamie stood under the stars for a long time, breathing in the night air and letting himself feel hope for the first time in weeks. It was fragile, this hope, easily crushed by the realities of their situation. But it was real and it was his, and he was going to fight for it. Derek could glare all he wanted. The truth was, Jamie had found something worth protecting, someone worth taking risks for. And he wasn't going to let fear win this time.